Hey everyone! It's great to have you here. Before we begin, I'd really appreciate a quick like and comment. It really helps the channel and motivates me to keep creating more stories. Quick update. A new Patreon poll went live yesterday ***, where you can vote for the stories you want to see next. Every story released on this channel is chosen through these Patreon polls. If you're enjoying this story, you don't have to wait for the next upload. The next 2 or more parts, and the first chapter of the next story, are already available on Patreon. You'll also get access to over 1,000 audio story chapters, 3 new story chapters every day, and exclusive stories you'll never find on YouTube. All the links are in the description and pinned comment. Enjoy the story. The last light of the day still clung to the rooftops of Konoha when the 5 of them finally cleared the Hokage Tower gates. The mission scroll had been stamped, the recovered crates inventoried, and the formal report accepted without question. 3 days of tracking, ambushes, and close quarters fighting against a well-armed smuggling ring had left everyone bruised, dirty, and running on the last scraps of adrenaline. Most of the male members of the temporary squad had already disappeared. Shikamaru had muttered something about optimal cloud coverage and vanished toward the training fields. Choji had been claimed by his mother the moment they stepped outside. Kiba had claimed Akamaru needed a full grooming and left without looking back. Within 15 minutes the street in front of the tower held only Naruto, Sakura, Hinata, Ino, and Tenten, plus 3 heavy crates of medical supplies that still needed to be moved. Sakura rolled her shoulders and grimaced at the pull of a half-healed bruise. "I'm not carrying these all the way to storage tonight. My arms are done." Ino pushed a strand of blonde hair out of her face. "My place is closer. Parents are in the capital until next week. We can dump the crates in the entryway and deal with the paperwork tomorrow." Tenten adjusted the weapon scroll on her back. "Works for me. My apartment is currently half armory, half laundry pile." Hinata stood a little apart, hands folded, eyes lowered. "I can help carry. It is not a problem." Naruto scratched the back of his head. The crates were awkward more than heavy, but the girls looked genuinely exhausted. "I'll help drop them off. Then I'm gone. I need a bath and about 12 hours of sleep." No one argued. They divided the load and started walking. He would remember the heat first. Not the clean heat of battle or the burn of Rasengan in his palm, but the thick, humid warmth of bodies pressed too close in a dim room that smelled of sake and skin. A hand, he never later decided whose, had slid under the hem of his shirt and traced the line of his ribs with slow, deliberate fingers. Another pair of hands had found the ties of his pants and tugged once, testing resistance. Someone's mouth had been against the side of his throat, breath hot, voice low and unsteady. He had looked up through a haze of alcohol and rising panic and seen lavender eyes watching him over a flushed shoulder, while pink hair brushed his collarbone and a confident blonde laugh floated somewhere behind him. The soft sound of fabric being pushed aside. A quiet, almost surprised moan. The moment the game stopped being a game. That fragment would return to him the next morning like a slap. For now it waited somewhere ahead in the dark. Ino's house sat on a quiet residential lane, larger than most genin could claim, with a wide living room that opened onto a small walled garden. They stacked the crates neatly against the entry wall. Naruto wiped sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist and turned toward the door. Ino caught his sleeve. "One drink. You carried the heaviest crate. Least we can do." Sakura was already sliding the shoji open and pulling bottles from a low cabinet. "Don't make it weird. We're celebrating. You were part of the team the whole way." Tenten shrugged and accepted a cup without comment. Hinata hesitated, then nodded once, small and polite. Naruto looked at the open door, at the darkening street, at the 4 tired faces watching him. The sensible choice was to leave. He took the cup instead. The first round was careful. They sat on the low cushions around the low table. Sake was poured in measured amounts. Conversation stayed on safe ground. The exact moment the lead smuggler had tried to use a flash tag and failed, the way Tenten's Saban had found a gap in armor at 30 paces, the headache Ino still carried from overusing her mind-body technique. Hinata spoke little, but when she did her observations about residual chakra signatures in the trees were precise. Naruto talked too much, as usual, and drank faster than he intended. The sake was better than the cheap stuff he usually bought. Smooth, then suddenly warm in the chest and limbs. A second bottle appeared. The light outside faded from gold to blue. Someone lit 2 oil lamps. The garden beyond the open doors became a rectangle of darkness. The village sounds grew distant. It was Sakura who broke the comfortable quiet. "We're not going to sit here rehashing the mission until we fall asleep. Truth or dare. Classic rules. Refuse and you drink." Ino's eyes lit up. "Finally. Something interesting." Tenten raised one eyebrow but didn't refuse. Hinata's cheeks were already faintly pink from the alcohol. She looked at the table for a long moment, then gave a small nod. Naruto felt a faint warning flicker at the base of his skull. Games like this with tired, half-drunk Kunoichi could tilt sideways. The sake had already loosened the part of him that usually listened to warnings. "Fine," he said. "But nothing too stupid." Ino smiled. "We'll see." They began carefully. Truth. Favorite food after a long mission. Dare, do 15 push-ups without chakra. Truth, most embarrassing training failure. Dare, recite the first verse of a children's song with a straight face. Laughter came easily. Cups were refilled. Faces grew warmer. The circle of cushions seemed smaller than it had an hour earlier. The questions began to lean. The empty cup spun and pointed at Sakura. Truth or dare? Truth. Ino leaned forward on her elbows. Have you ever thought about kissing someone currently in this room? Sakura's green eyes flicked to Naruto for half a second, then away. Color rose in her cheeks, but her voice stayed steady. After missions. When the adrenaline is still high. Once or twice. That's all you're getting. The cup spun again. It landed on Hinata. Truth or dare? Hinata's voice was barely audible. Truth. Who in this room do you find the most attractive? Hinata's pale eyes lifted, met Naruto's, and held for one heartbeat too long. Her fingers tightened around her cup until the knuckles whitened. I would rather drink. She drank. The cup pointed at Naruto. Truth or dare, dead last? He should have chosen truth. Some stubborn, sake-warm part of him chose dare instead. Dare. Ino's smile sharpened. Kiss the person on your left. On the mouth. 5 full seconds. The person on his left was Hinata. The room went quiet enough that the soft hiss of the oil lamps became noticeable. Hinata's eyes widened. A deep flush climbed from her collar to her hairline. Naruto felt his own pulse jump hard against his throat. The alcohol made the moment stretch. He leaned in. Hinata did not pull away. Her lips were soft and tasted faintly of sake and something sweeter. 5 seconds lasted longer than they should have. When he sat back, her eyes were glassy and her breathing had changed. Sakura made a small sound in the back of her throat. Tenten looked toward the garden, but the tips of her ears were red. Ino looked extremely satisfied. The game continued. Dares grew bolder by degrees. Truths grew more personal. Someone dared Tenten to sit in Naruto's lap for an entire round. She did it with a muttered complaint about the whole thing being childish, but she settled across his thighs without real resistance. Her weight was solid and warm. Naruto kept his hands carefully at his sides until she shifted and his palm brushed the outside of her thigh by accident. Neither of them moved it for several long seconds. Another dare had Sakura remove her outer jacket. Underneath she wore only a thin dark tank top that clung in the warm air of the room. The shape of her was impossible to ignore. When she noticed Naruto looking, she met his eyes and did not cover herself. Hinata was dared to whisper one thing she had never told anyone into Naruto's ear. Whatever she said made heat rush up his neck. Her breath against his skin lingered after the words were finished. The third bottle emptied. A fourth was opened without comment. The air in the room had thickened. Laughter still came, but it sat lower in the chest. Looks lasted longer. Knees touched and stayed touching. A hand rested on an arm and was not removed. Naruto's thoughts moved slower than usual. He knew, in the distant part of his mind that still functioned, that the game had stopped being harmless some time ago. No one called for a pause. No one suggested they switch to cards or simply talk. The circle had drawn tighter until they sat nearly knee to knee. Ino spun the cup one more time. It pointed at Naruto again. Truth or dare? He looked around the small circle. 4 pairs of eyes watched him with different temperatures of the same intent. Sakura's were sharp and curious. Hinata's were dark and uncertain and wanting. Tenten's were steady, almost evaluating. Ino's were open and already several steps past the rules. He should have stood up and left an hour earlier. He stayed. "Dare," he said. Ino's voice was quieter now. "Take your shirt off." He pulled it over his head and dropped it beside the cushions. Cool air touched his skin for only a moment before the weight of their attention replaced it. The whisker marks stood out against the flush rising in his face. Someone exhaled softly. The next dare went to Sakura. Kiss him again, longer, and use her hands. She did. Her mouth was hungrier than Hinata's had been. Her fingers slid into his hair and held him in place. When she pulled back, her lips were parted and her eyes half-lidded. Something in the room tipped past the point of return. The cup was forgotten. The formal rules dissolved. What remained was the press of bodies, the low murmur of voices, and the quiet, collective decision that none of them were going to stop. Sakura pushed him back against the cushions with both hands flat on his chest. The movement was firm rather than rough. She swung a leg over his thighs and settled her weight across him, pink hair falling forward. The thin tank top did little to hide the quick rise and fall of her breathing. Naruto's hands hovered uselessly for a second before settling on her waist because there was nowhere else that felt less dangerous, and danger had already been left behind. "You've been looking all night," she said against his mouth. "Don't pretend you're surprised." She kissed him before he could answer. One hand braced on his shoulder, the other slid down. She paused only long enough to feel the sword already pressing against the fabric, then made a small, pleased sound. Ino moved in from the side. Long blonde hair brushed Naruto's arm as she leaned close. "Share forehead." Her voice was light, but her eyes were dark. She turned his face toward her with two fingers under his chin and tasting. When she drew back, she looked at Sakura over her shoulder and raised an eyebrow. Sakura clicked her tongue but shifted enough to give Ino space. Now two warm bodies pressed against him. The combined scent of sake, skin, and the faint residual metalland smoke of the mission filled his head. One of his hands stayed on Sakura's hip. The other found the curve of Ino's lower back when she arched closer. Hinata remained on her knees a short distance away, cheeks scarlet, fingers twisted in the fabric of her pants. Her breathing had gone shallow. Every time Naruto's eyes met hers, she looked down, then back up as if pulled. Tenten sat farther back, arms loosely folded, watching with the same focused attention she gave to weapon trajectories. She had not joined yet. She was still deciding. Sakura's mouth moved to the side of Naruto's throat. Teeth scraped lightly over his pulse. At the same moment, Ino's hand slipped fully under waistband. "Unfortunately, the platform doesn't allow me to include those kinds of details. But you can find the full uncensored version on Patreon. For just $4, you'll get access to over 1,000 scorching hot episodes." Hinata hesitated only a breath. Then she crawled forward until she was close enough for Naruto to see the fine tremor in her fingers. Up close, her eyes were almost black. She did not speak. She simply leaned in and pressed her mouth to the corner of his, careful and shaking, while the other continued to touch him. The contrast was sharp. Sakura and Ino were confident, almost greedy. Hinata was uncertain and sincere, and somehow more intimate because of it. When she drew back, she stayed close, forehead nearly touching his. Tenten finally moved. She rose, circled the low table, and knelt behind Naruto's head. Her fingers slid into his hair, not pulling, simply holding. From that angle she could see everything. The way Sakura's tank top had ridden up, the flush spreading down Ino's throat, the soft open expression on Hinata's face. "He's completely gone," Tenten said quietly. Her thumb brushed his temple. "Look!" Naruto could not form an answer. His body answered for him, arching into every touch. Sakura had shifted so the heat between legs pressed against his thigh. She rolled her hips once, testing, and both of them breathed out hard. Clothes came off in stages. Sakura's tank top was pulled away and discarded. Ino made an appreciative noise and leaned over while her hand kept working. Sakura's head tipped back. The sound she made was unrestrained. Hinata's hands finally found courage. She traced the whisker marks on his cheeks, then lower. Naruto's control frayed. The weight of bodies and the thickening scent in the room were more than he had ever prepared for. He moved without permission. Sakura lifted herself and settled bare across thighs. The friction was maddening. "Not yet," she said, more to herself than to him. Not until I say. Ino copied with efficient movements. Blonde hair spilled over shoulders. She moved behind Sakura, pressed against her back, and reached around while Sakura continued the slow grind. Hinata was still dressed. The contrast made her look even more undone. Her jacket hung open, the high collar of her shirt pulled aside. Naruto reached for her with the hand that was free. Tenten's hands never left his hair. She watched everything with dark, steady eyes. When his gaze found hers, she held it without looking away. Sakura finally rose high enough to position him. Get the full uncensored experience on Patreon, 1,000 plus episodes for just $4. They stayed like that for a while, breathing hard, tangled, the air heavy and warm. Sakura eventually lifted off him with a soft sound and collapsed sideways onto the cushions. Ino stretched out along his other side. Hinata remained close, forehead against his shoulder, still trembling faintly. Tenten sat back on her heels, studying the scene until her expression slowly softened. No one spoke for a long time. The aftermath was quieter than the act. Clothes were gathered into loose piles without much order. Someone found a light blanket and draped it over the worst of the exposed skin. Cups still sat scattered across the low table, some empty, some with the last fingers of sake. The air smelled of alcohol and the faint metallic edge of the earlier mission that none of them had fully washed away. Sakura lay on her back staring at the ceiling, one arm thrown across her eyes. We're going to regret this when the sun comes up. Ino's voice was drowsy and unrepentant. Speak for yourself. Hinata made a small sound that might have been agreement or simple exhaustion. Her fingers were still loosely curled in the fabric of Naruto's discarded shirt. Tenten stood and stretched, joints popping softly. I'm locking the front door. No one is walking home in this condition. Naruto lay in the middle of them, body heavy, mind trying and failing to catch up with what had just happened. Every time he closed his eyes he saw fragments. Sakura's face above him, Ino's smile, Hinata's trembling mouth, the steady weight of Tenten's hands in his hair. His heart still beat too fast. He should get up. He should leave. He should say something that made any of this make sense. Instead he stayed where he was while the girls settled around him in a loose, exhausted sprawl. One by one their breathing evened. Sakura's arm slid down. Ino's head found his shoulder. Hinata curled closer, face hidden against his side. Tenten returned from the door and sat with her back against the wall, watching the others with half-lidded eyes until those two closed. The last oil lamp burned low. Naruto stared at the dark ceiling and felt the weight of 4 warm bodies around him and knew, with a clarity that cut through the remaining sake, that nothing about the morning was going to be simple. He closed his eyes anyway. Sleep took him before he could decide what to do about any of it. Who's the best girl in today's story? Cast your vote in the comments, and if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel and motivates me to keep making more stories. Now, back to the story. Naruto woke to the soft weight of limbs across his chest and the slow, even breathing of 4 women. For several seconds he did not move. The ceiling of Ino's living room was still dim with early light. A blanket had been pulled haphazardly over most of them during the night. Sakura's pink hair was spilled across his left shoulder. Ino's arm was draped over his stomach. Hinata's forehead rested against his ribs, her fingers still loosely curled in the fabric of the shirt he no longer wore. Tenten sat a little apart against the wall, head tilted back, one hand resting on her knee as if she had fallen asleep mid-watch. The events of the previous night returned in fragments, then in a single crushing wave. Heat. Hands. Mouths. The way Sakura had looked at him. The soft sound Hinata made. Ino's laugh. Tenten's steady eyes. Naruto's heart slammed against his ribs. He needed to leave. Now. Before any of them opened their eyes and the night became something that had to be discussed in daylight. Moving felt like disarming a trap. He eased Sakura's arm away first, then carefully shifted Ino's hand. Hinata made a small noise in her sleep and curled tighter for a moment before settling again. Naruto slid out from under the blanket inch by inch. Every rustle of fabric sounded too loud. He did not dare look at their faces for more than a second. The front door was locked. Tenten had said she would lock it. He found the latch with trembling fingers, slid it open as quietly as possible, and stepped into the cool morning air of the residential street. He did not run until he turned the first corner. Then he ran. Sakura woke to an empty space beside her, and the cool draft from an open door. She sat up slowly. The blanket slipped. Morning light cut across the living room, showing the scattered cups, the discarded clothes, the 3 other women still half asleep. Ino stirred, groaned, and pushed herself up on one elbow. Her blonde hair was a mess. "He's gone," Sakura said. Ino blinked, looked at the empty cushions, then at the open door. A slow smile pulled at her mouth. "Of course he is. Classic Naruto." Hinata sat up more carefully, holding the blanket to her chest. Her face was already turning pink. Did we really?" Tenten opened her eyes without moving from the wall. "We did. And he bolted the second he could." For a while no one spoke. The silence was not awkward so much as heavy with the memory of what their bodies still remembered. Sakura rubbed her face with both hands, then let them fall. "I should feel embarrassed," she said. "Or angry. Or something." Ino stretched, completely unbothered by her state of undress. "Do you?" Sakura was quiet for a moment. "No. That's the problem." Hinata's voice was soft. "It felt different. Not like a mistake. Not completely." Tenten stood, gathered her clothes, and began dressing with efficient movements. "He's going to try to pretend it never happened. You know that, right?" Ino's eyes gleamed. "Then we don't let him." Sakura looked at her. "What are you thinking?" "I'm thinking last night was the best I've felt in months. And I'm thinking Naruto looked at all of us like he couldn't believe it was real. I'm also thinking he doesn't get to run away and act like we forced him." Ino pulled her shirt on. "We find him. We finish the conversation. On our terms." Hinata's hands tightened on the blanket. "You mean, hunt him?" "I mean we don't let him hide," Ino said. "There's 4 of us. He's one loud blonde. How hard can it be?" Tenten finished tying her boots. "Harder than you think if he decides to use clones. But I'm in." Sakura was already reaching for her own clothes. The decision settled over them without anyone needing to vote. The night had cracked something open. None of them were ready to close it again. They cleaned the living room in near silence, washed the cups, folded the blanket. By the time the sun was fully up they had a plan. 3 groups. Sakura and Ino would take the central streets and the market area, the loud, direct approach. Hinata and Tenten would cover the quieter residential zones and the training grounds on the east side. If needed, they would meet again at midday and adjust. No one said the word trap. No one needed to. Naruto did not go home. Home was the first place they would look. Instead he cut through back alleys, avoided the main roads, and ended up on one of the higher training platforms that overlooked the village. The morning air was still cool. His head throbbed from the sake and the lack of real sleep. Every time he closed his eyes he saw the same images: Sakura above him, Ino's hand, Hinata's trembling mouth, Tenten watching. He sat on the edge of the platform with his elbows on his knees and tried to make the memories smaller. It didn't work. He had wanted it. That was the worst part. Somewhere between the 3rd bottle and the moment Sakura pushed him down, he had stopped pretending he was only going along with the game. The girls had been drunk, yes. So had he. But the way they looked at him, the way they touched, that had not felt like a joke. And now they were going to wake up and either pretend nothing happened or make it 100 times more complicated. He needed time. Space. A plan that did not involve facing 4 kunoichi who had seen him completely undone. He stayed on the platform longer than he should have. By mid-morning the village was fully awake. Naruto moved again, this time toward a quieter storage district near the old training fields. Fewer people. More places to duck out of sight if he heard familiar voices. He almost made it. Sakura's voice cut across the narrow street behind him, calm and carrying. "Naruto." He froze, then turned. Sakura and Ino stood at the mouth of the alley. Both looked rested, showered, and far too composed for people who had spent the previous night the way they had. Sakura's arms were crossed. Ino's hands were in her pockets, a small smile already in place. "Morning," Ino said. "Sleep well?" Naruto's mouth was dry. Look, about last night." "We're not here to talk about last night in the middle of the street," Sakura cut in. She glanced around, then nodded toward a low, unused storage building set back from the road. The door was half open. Inside. Now. He could have run. Part of him wanted to. The larger part of him walked toward the building because the alternative was a public scene he was not ready for. The interior was dim and smelled of dust and old wood. Crates were stacked along one wall. Light came in thin bars through the high windows. The door shut behind them with a soft click. Ino leaned against it. Sakura stepped closer. "You left without a word," Sakura said. "I panicked. Obviously." Ino's voice was lighter, but her eyes were serious. "We woke up and you were gone. That hurt more than I expected it to." Naruto ran a hand through his hair. "What was I supposed to do? Sit there and wait for the awkward morning conversation? Hey, so last night we all..." "Yes," Sakura said. "That's exactly what you were supposed to do." Silence stretched. The air in the small building felt warmer than it should have. Ino pushed off the door and walked closer until she was within arm's reach. "We're not angry that it happened. We're angry that you ran. There's a difference." Naruto's pulse was loud in his ears. "So what now?" Sakura's green eyes held his. "Now we finish what we started. Without the sake this time. So no one can pretend they didn't mean it." Sakura closed the remaining distance and kissed him. It was not the same as the night before. There was no alcohol blurring the edges. She was sure, her hands already sliding under shirt. Naruto made a low sound of surprise that turned into something else when Ino stepped in behind him and pressed against his back, her lips finding the side of his neck. "Still think this was a mistake?" Ino murmured against his skin. He didn't answer with words. His hands found Sakura's waist, then the hem of her top. The morning light striped her skin. Ino's fingers worked at the ties of his pants from behind, while Sakura kissed him. They moved him back until his shoulders met a stack of crates. Sakura's hands were impatient now, pushing clothing aside, mapping the same paths she had learned in the dark. Ino reached around. "Some scenes are too spicy for this platform. Find the full uncensored versions on Patreon. Only $4. Naruto's head tipped back against the wood. Sakura took the opportunity to mouth along his throat, then lower, teeth grazing his collarbone. Sakura stepped back only long enough. She didn't bother with anything else. When she came back, she climbed him, one knee on a lower crate for balance. Get the full uncensored experience on Patreon, 1,000 plus episodes for just $4. They stayed locked together for several long breaths. Sakura's forehead rested against his. Ino's arms were still around both of them from behind. No one spoke at first. Then Sakura gave a short, breathless laugh. "Still want to run?" Naruto's voice was wrecked. "Give me a minute." Ino smiled against the back of his neck. "You can have a minute. Then we talk about the fact that Hinata and Tenten are also looking for you. And they are not going to be as direct as we were." Sakura eventually lifted off him with a quiet sound and reached for her clothes. Ino handed Naruto his pants without comment. The three of them dressed in the dusty light of the storage room, the earlier heat slowly cooling into something more complicated. Naruto leaned against the crates, still trying to get his breathing under control. "You're really not going to let this go?" "No," Sakura said simply. She pulled her top back on. "Last night happened. This morning happened. We're not interested in pretending otherwise." Ino tilted her head. "Hinata's been quiet about it, but she hasn't stopped thinking about you since she opened her eyes. Tenten too, in her own way. You're not escaping this by hiding on rooftops." Naruto dragged a hand down his face. "What exactly do you want from me?" Sakura met his eyes. "We want you to stop running. We want to see where this goes when we're all sober and no one is forced. And we want you to understand that none of us regret it." He looked between them. The words sat heavy in his chest. Part of him still wanted to bolt. A larger, more honest part of him already knew he wouldn't get far. "I need time," he said finally. Ino stepped closer and patted his cheek once, almost gently. "You can have a little. Not much. We'll be seeing you, Naruto." They left first. Sakura paused at the door, glanced back once, then followed Ino out into the sunlight. Naruto stayed in the storage room until their footsteps faded. His body still hummed. His mind was a mess of heat and panic and something that felt dangerously like anticipation. He slipped out the back way, avoided the main streets, and headed for deeper cover. Somewhere in the village, 2 other kunoichi were already looking for him. He had the strong, sinking feeling that the game had only just begun. This version is censored. The full uncensored story is available on Patreon, over 1,000 hot episodes for just $4.